5 years ago, my daughter kicked me out of my own house with $50 and told me to find somewhere that doesn't smell like death. Last week, she stood at the gates of my new villa, begging me to let her family move in. The irony? She still doesn't know how I afforded it. The morning everything changed started like any other Wednesday in my 73 years of life. I was standing in my kitchen in Oklahoma City, striking a match to light Harold's memorial candle. The lavender scent filled the air as the flame caught the wick, and I whispered my daily good morning to my husband's photograph on the mantel. He'd been gone for 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days, but the routine never wavered. That's when I heard the front door slam open without so much as a knock. My daughter Jennifer burst in like a tornado, her blonde hair whipping around her shoulders, designer purse swinging from her arm. Behind her came my son-in-law Derek, their teenage twin boys Marcus and Tyler trailing behind, with their faces buried in their phones, and their 8-year-old daughter Lily, who at least had the decency to wave at me before her mother started her tirade. "There it is again," Jennifer announced, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She waved her manicured hand in front of her nose dramatically. "That smell, like someone died in here and nobody bothered to remove the body." I steadied myself against the kitchen counter, the match still burning between my fingers until it nearly reached my skin. "Jennifer, it's just a small candle." "It's not just a candle, Mom." She marched across my living room, her stiletto heels clicking against the hardwood floors Harold and I had saved 3 years to afford back in 1987. "It's this whole creepy shrine thing you've got going on. The candles, the pictures everywhere, his coffee cup still sitting in the dish drainer like he's coming back from the dead to drink from it." Derek stood awkwardly by the door, his hands shoved deep in his khaki pockets. He'd never been comfortable with confrontation, which explained how he'd ended up married to my bulldozer of a daughter. The boys hadn't even looked up from their phones, probably used to their mother's dramatic outbursts by now. But little Lily was staring at me with those big brown eyes that reminded me so much of Harold's. "Grandma," she whispered, tugging on my cardigan, "why is Mommy yelling?" Before I could answer, Jennifer whirled around and pointed a perfectly manicured finger at me. "Because Grandma won't stop living in the past, sweetheart. She's turning this whole house into a museum for a dead person." The words hit me like a physical blow. I blew out the match and set it carefully on the saucer beside Harold's picture, trying to keep my hands from shaking with the rage that was building in my chest. "Sit down, Mom," Jennifer commanded, gesturing toward my own kitchen table like she owned the place. "We need to have a family meeting." Derek finally spoke up, his voice barely above a mumble. "Jen, maybe we should ease into this." "Ease into what?" she snapped. "She's been living in this mausoleum for over 2 years, Derek. Look around you. Everything is exactly the same as the day Dad died. His reading glasses are still on the coffee table. His slippers are still by the back door. She even keeps his side of the bed made, like he's going to crawl into it tonight." I sat down heavily in my chair, the same one I'd occupied during thousands of family dinners over the decades. The twins had finally looked up from their phones, probably sensing the tension in the room. Marcus, the older one by 12 minutes, had inherited his mother's sharp features and apparently her lack of empathy. "Grandma's house does smell weird," he said matter-of-factly, "like old people and funeral flowers." Tyler nodded in agreement. "Yeah, and it's super depressing in here. All these pictures of dead Grandpa everywhere." Little Lily climbed onto my lap, wrapping her small arms around my neck. "I like the candles, Grandma. They smell pretty." Jennifer's face softened for just a moment when she looked at her daughter, but then the hardness returned. "Lily, honey, go play in the living room for a few minutes. Mommy needs to talk to Grandma about grown-up things." As soon as Lily was out of earshot, Jennifer leaned forward across the table, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a compassionate tone, but came across as condescending. "Mom, this isn't healthy. You're 73 years old, living alone in a house that's way too big for you, surrounded by reminders of death. It's not normal." "Normal according to who?" I asked quietly. "According to everyone," she shot back. "The neighbors have been talking. Mrs. Henderson told me she sees you talking to Dad's picture through the window. People think you're losing your mind." Derek cleared his throat uncomfortably. "What Jennifer is trying to say is that we're worried about you, Mom Patterson. Maybe it's time to consider alternatives." "Alternatives?" I repeated the word, tasting its implications. Jennifer reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a glossy brochure. "I've been doing research. There's a lovely senior living community on the north side of town, Sunrise Manor. They have activities, medical staff on site, people your own age to socialize with. You wouldn't have to worry about maintaining this big house anymore." I looked down at the brochure. Smiling, elderly faces stared back at me from the pages, all of them looking suspiciously happy for people who'd been warehoused away from their families. "You want to put me in a nursing home." "It's not a nursing home," Jennifer insisted. "It's independent living with support services. You'd have your own apartment, your own space, but without all the baggage." Baggage, another loaded word. Derek was fidgeting with his wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd noticed during every uncomfortable family gathering for the past 15 years. "The thing is, Mom Patterson, we're in a bit of a financial bind ourselves." Jennifer shot him a look that could have melted steel, but he continued anyway. "My hours got cut at the plant, and with the twins starting their senior year and Lily needing new school clothes, money's getting tight." What Derek is failing to articulate properly, Jennifer said through gritted teeth, is that we can't afford our current situation anymore. We're 3 months behind on our mortgage. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "And you think selling my house will solve your problems?" "It would solve everyone's problems," Jennifer said, her voice rising again. "You get professional care in a safe environment. We get the financial relief we need to keep our family stable. And this house goes to people who will actually live in it instead of treating it like a shrine." She pulled out her phone and started scrolling through something. "I already had a realtor come look at the property. In this market, with the location and the lot size, we're looking at least $350,000, maybe $400 if we stage it right." "Stage it right," I echoed her words, feeling more numb with each passing moment. "Obviously, we'd have to clear out all the personal items," she continued, waving vaguely toward Harold's chair. "The furniture is mostly outdated anyway. We could donate it or have an estate sale." An estate sale? The hits just kept coming. Derek tried one more time to inject some sensitivity into the conversation. "Mom Patterson, you'd still get your share of the proceeds. After we pay off our debt and cover the moving expenses, there should be enough left to cover several years at Sunrise Manor." Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Actually, Derek, I've been thinking about that. Mom's only going to live, what, maybe 10 more years? 15 at the outside? That's a lot of money to spend on a facility when she could just as easily move in with us." My head snapped up to stare at her. "Move in with you?" "Temporarily," she added quickly, "just until we get back on our feet financially. You could take the guest room. It's small, but it's perfectly adequate for one person. And you'd be around family, which is what really matters." I looked around my kitchen, taking in the coffee maker Harold had bought me for our 40th anniversary, the herb garden visible through the window that we'd planted together, the pencil marks on the door frame where we'd measured Jennifer's height every birthday until she turned 16 and declared herself too old for such childish things. "Let me see if I understand this correctly," I said slowly. "You want me to sell my home, give you the proceeds to pay off your debts, and then move into your guest room where I presumably won't be allowed to light candles or display pictures of my deceased husband?" "You're being dramatic, Mom," Jennifer said, but I caught the flush creeping up her neck that always appeared when she knew she was in the wrong. "And what if I say no?" The silence that followed was deafening. Derek studied his shoes. The twins had drifted back into the kitchen, drawn by the tension. Lily was peeking around the corner from the living room. Finally, Jennifer spoke, her voice cold and final. "Then you'll be choosing a dead man over your living family, and you'll be doing it alone because we won't be able to keep enabling this unhealthy obsession anymore." What happened next still feels surreal even now. Jennifer reached into her wallet and counted out $50 in crumpled bills, slapping them down on my kitchen table like she was paying for a meal at a diner. "Here," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Find somewhere that doesn't smell like death." I stared at the money, then at my daughter. "You're kicking me out of my own home?" "I'm forcing you to face reality," she shot back. "This house is too big for you, too expensive to maintain, and too full of ghosts for anyone to live in comfortably. You can either do this the easy way and move to Sunrise Manor, or you can do it the hard way and find somewhere else to take your grief and your candles and your conversations with dead people." Derek looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Jennifer, don't you think we should..." "Should what? Should enable her delusions? Should let her waste away in this mausoleum while our own children suffer financially?" She turned back to me, her eyes blazing. "You have until Sunday to decide. Either you agree to sell the house and move somewhere appropriate for a woman your age, or you take that $50 and figure out your own arrangements." Marcus chose that moment to chime in with all the sensitivity of a teenage boy. "Can we get going? This place gives me the creeps, and I'm supposed to meet Connor at the mall." Tyler nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, and it's starting to smell like those weird candles again. It's making me nauseous." Little Lily ran across the kitchen and threw her arms around my waist. "I don't want Grandma to move away," she said, her voice muffled against my cardigan. Jennifer pried her daughter's arms loose. "Grandma isn't moving away, sweetheart. She's just going to live somewhere better suited for grandmas." "But I like coming here," Lily protested. "Grandma makes the best cookies, and she lets me help water the flowers." "There are plenty of grandmas at Sunrise Manor who make cookies," Jennifer said firmly. "And they have activities and crafts and people your age to play with." "I don't want to play with old people," Lily said, causing Derek to snort with suppressed laughter despite the tension. Jennifer gathered up her purse and keys, her movements sharp and efficient. "Sunday, Mom, that's your deadline. Either you make the smart choice or you make your own arrangements with that $50. They filed out of my kitchen like a parade of disappointment, leaving only the lingering scent of Jennifer's expensive perfume and the echo of words that couldn't be taken back. What none of them knew, what I'd never told a living soul, was that Harold had been much more than the simple insurance adjuster everyone thought he was. During his 42-year career, he'd also been quietly buying up small parcels of land across rural Oklahoma. Worthless scrubland mostly, the kind of property that sold for next to nothing because it was too rocky to farm and too remote to develop. But Harold had a theory about oil and gas deposits in our part of the state, a theory he'd developed through decades of investigating insurance claims for energy companies. He'd studied geological surveys in his spare time, mapped out mineral rights, and slowly assembled a patchwork of properties that looked random to everyone else but made perfect sense to him. The letter had arrived 2 days before Jennifer's ultimatum, forwarded from Harold's old office, where his former secretary still collected his mail out of kindness. It was from Devon Energy Corporation, informing me that they'd identified significant natural gas deposits beneath 3 of Harold's old properties I'd inherited without even knowing they existed. The compensation offer was enough to make me dizzy. $1.8 million for the drilling rights, plus ongoing royalties estimated at $35,000 per month for the next 20 years. The letter was signed by a vice president who apologized for the delay in locating me and requested a meeting at my earliest convenience. I'd hidden the letter in Harold's old toolbox in the garage, the same place he'd always kept his rainy day funds and important papers. Jennifer had been through every inch of the house looking for valuables after Harold died, but she'd never thought to check his workshop. Too dirty, too masculine, too beneath her notice. As I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at those 50 crumpled dollars, I thought about Harold's voice on the night before his last heart attack. We'd been sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Dorothy," he'd said, reaching over to take my hand, "if something happens to me, don't let them push you around. You're stronger than they think you are, and you've got more resources than they know about." I'd thought he was talking about the life insurance policy and our small savings account. I never imagined he'd left me wealthy enough to disappear entirely. I spent that Thursday night packing a single suitcase with my most essential belongings. Not much, really. Some clothes, my medications, Harold's watch, our wedding photo, and enough lavender candles to last a few weeks. Everything else could wait. Friday morning, I called a taxi to take me to the Devon Energy offices downtown. The meeting lasted 4 hours and required more paperwork than I'd signed in my entire life, but by the end of it, I was $1.8 million richer with the promise of monthly royalty checks that would make my Social Security payments look like pocket change. The lawyer Devon provided helped me open new bank accounts and set up a financial advisor. He also recommended a private investigator who specialized in helping people disappear from unwanted family situations. For the first time in my life, I could afford to buy privacy. Saturday, I drove 3 hours north to a small town called Stillwater, where land was cheap and nosy daughters were scarce. I paid cash for a modest ranch house on 10 acres, complete with a guest cottage, a greenhouse perfect for year-round gardening, and most importantly, no neighbors close enough to complain about lavender candles. The house had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and excellent ventilation for memorial candles. I could light one in every room if I wanted to, and I often did. Sunday morning, while Jennifer was probably checking her watch and rehearsing her speech about my stubbornness, I was at the Stillwater Farmers Market, buying herbs for my new garden and introducing myself to the vendors who would become my friends. Jennifer tried to reach me exactly 3 times over the next 5 years. The first call came 6 months after I disappeared, when she'd finally realized I wasn't coming back and wasn't answering my old phone number. "Mom, where are you?" Her voice was tight with frustration on the voicemail she left. "I went by Sunrise Manor and they said you never applied. The realtor said you never signed any papers to list the house. What the hell is going on?" I deleted the message without listening to it twice. The second call came 2 years later, on what would have been Harold's 75th birthday. This time she sounded desperate. "Mom, please call me back. Derek lost his job again, and we're about to lose the house. The boys are in college now, and Lily needs dental work, and I need to know you're okay. I need to know how you're surviving without any help from us." I almost called her back that time. Almost. But then I remembered the $50 and the cold dismissal of my grief, and I deleted that message too. The third call came last Christmas. Jennifer was crying. "Mom, I know you're out there somewhere. I know you can hear this. I was wrong, okay? I was wrong about everything. We should never have treated you that way. Derek's been sober for 8 months now, and he keeps saying we need to find you and apologize. Lily asks about you every day. She's 13 now, and she still remembers your chocolate chip cookies." I'd sat in my greenhouse that day, surrounded by thriving herbs and vegetables, listening to my daughter's voice break with regret. But I didn't call her back. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Last Tuesday changed everything. I was watering my roses when my security system chimed with an alert from the front gate. The camera showed a beat-up Honda with Oklahoma plates, and behind the wheel sat my daughter. She looked older, grayer, with lines around her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and financial stress. Derek was in the passenger seat, staring up at my house with an expression of complete shock. In the back seat, I could see 3 figures: the twins, now young men of 22, and Lily, a beautiful teenager who'd inherited Harold's thoughtful eyes and my stubborn chin. I watched them through the security monitor for 15 minutes, debating whether to acknowledge their presence or simply wait for them to leave. Jennifer had gotten out of the car and was pacing back and forth in front of the gate, gesturing wildly as she spoke to her family through the windows. Finally, I decided to face them. I walked down the long gravel driveway, past my greenhouse and garden, past the fountain Harold would have loved, toward the wrought iron gate that separated my new life from my old disappointments. "Mom," Jennifer's voice cracked when she saw me approaching. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. "Mom, is that really you?" I stopped on my side of the gate, my hands folded calmly in front of me. I was wearing a lavender sundress and gardening hat, probably looking healthier and more relaxed than I had in years. "Hello, Jennifer. This is—" She gestured helplessly toward my house, her voice barely a whisper. "This is your house? Where did you get the money for this place?" "I managed," I said simply. Derek had gotten out of the car now, and I could see the desperation written across both their faces. Jennifer's designer clothes were long gone, replaced by a faded t-shirt and jeans with holes in the knees. Derek's hair had thinned considerably, and there were deep shadows under his eyes that spoke of stress and probably drinking. The twins emerged from the backseat, both looking embarrassed to be there. Marcus had inherited his father's height, but his mother's sharp features, while Tyler had gotten Harold's build and gentle demeanor. They nodded awkwardly in my direction, but didn't speak. Lily was the last one out of the car, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw her. She'd grown into a beautiful young woman with long brown hair and Harold's kind eyes. She stared at me through the gate with a mixture of wonder and sadness. "Grandma," she said softly, "is it really you?" Before I could answer, Jennifer stepped forward, her hands gripping the iron bars of the gate like a prisoner. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "We're in serious trouble. We lost the house 6 months ago. Derek's been out of work for over a year, and the boys had to drop out of college because we couldn't afford tuition anymore." She paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "We've been living in a motel for 3 weeks, but we can't afford it much longer. We used our last credit card to put gas in the car to drive here." Derek finally spoke up, his voice hoarse. "We hired a private investigator to find you. Cost us money we didn't have, but Jennifer was convinced you'd help us if we could just explain." "Explain what?" I asked quietly. Jennifer's face crumpled. "Explain that I was wrong. Explain that I was scared and stupid, and I took it out on you because it was easier than dealing with my own problems. Explain that I've regretted every word I said to you for 5 years. Lily pressed her face against the gate, tears streaming down her cheeks. Grandma, I missed you so much. I kept all the pictures you gave me, and I still have the recipe for your chocolate chip cookies, but they never taste right when I make them. For a moment, I felt my resolve wavering. This was my family, flawed and cruel as they'd been. These were the people I'd raised and loved and forgiven countless times over the years. But then I remembered Harold's memorial candle being called a symbol of unhealthy obsession. I remembered being told I smelled like death. I remembered $50 crumpled and the command to find somewhere else to take my grief. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wallet. Jennifer's eyes lit up with desperate hope as I counted out $50 in crisp $20 bills. I folded them carefully and passed them through the gate. "Here," I said, echoing her words from 5 years ago. "Find somewhere that doesn't smell like death." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer stared at the money in her hand like it might bite her. "Mom," she whispered, "this is different. We're family. We're blood. You can't just—" "Blood," I interrupted gently, "is also what you taste when someone cuts you deep enough." I turned and began walking back up the driveway toward my house, where Harold's picture waited for me on the mantel, surrounded by lavender candles that burned bright and clean in the afternoon sun. Behind me, I could hear Jennifer calling my name, her voice growing more desperate with each step I took away from her. I heard Lily crying and the deeper voices of my grandsons trying to comfort their mother. But I didn't turn around. I'd learned, finally, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices. That evening, I lit 3 candles for Harold and told him about my day. My house smelled like lavender and justice, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt truly at peace. The irony, as I'd said in the beginning, was that Jennifer still didn't know how I'd afforded my new life. She'd probably spend years wondering, years searching for answers I'd never give her. Because some secrets are worth more than money. Some silences speak louder than words. And sometimes the best revenge is living well while others learn to live with their regrets. I had more stories to tell, more truths to share about what happens when families show you exactly who they are. But tonight, in my beautiful home that smelled like love and second chances, I was content to let this lesson sink in. When a grandmother finally stops accepting scraps and starts demanding respect, the whole family learns something they'll never forget.